Hello and welcome to my channel. My name is David Novak. One of the poets of my juventud, if you will, was the Spanish poet Federico Garcia Lorca, and I thought that I would show off my prize editions of his works. I guess I have to pull them back. Of course, this one you can't see very well. There's never been an adequate edition of his work in English, at least when I was looking. I'm not looking anymore. I think I have a New Directions selected bilingual edition. This, of course, does not have any English. So in here we have the Libro de Poemas, Poema del Cante Hondo, Romancero Gitano, Poeta en Nueva York, Odas, Llanto por Sánchez Mejías. I guess Odas is by itself, and then Llanto por Sánchez Mejías, which is just a very long poem lamenting the death of the bullfighter Sánchez Mejías, who was his friend, I believe. Of course, back in the day when I was reading this stuff, I didn't care about bullfighting. Now, of course, I think it's a horrible travesty, and it disgusts me that he wrote such a lament for this bullfighter. But that's the way it is. And then this also includes Bodas de Sangre and Yerma. So it's mostly poetry, but it's got a couple of plays. In this book, they did it the other way around. It's mostly plays, but then you can see at the end there, they've got primeras canciones and canciones. So you've got a little bit of poetry at the back. When I was young, I would mostly be reading the poetry. I had to read a play or two in school at one point, and I think, let's see if it's here. No, I don't see it. There was a short play that he did that I really liked, and I'm just not seeing it here. It's the Love of So-and-so in the Garden. I can't even remember the title, but I really liked that play, and I would read it again if I saw it, but I'm surprised it's not here. If it's not here, how the heck did I find it? I believe he wrote a lot of incidental, shorter plays for the theater and for the puppet theater, which perhaps are not in here. But these two volumes are just really wonderful. I don't know if they are still printed, but I have seen this edition held up, not of Lorca, but this publishing house held up by Mariana of Mariana Mas Books, is it? Something like that is her booktube channel. And when I see them, I used to have a lot of other things printed by this house. I had the Anaconda, and then The Return of Anaconda by Horacio Quiroga, which I never managed to read, and at the time of a book purge, I think I got rid of it. It could still be here possibly, but I had a teacher who was a fan of that story from his school days, no doubt. And I think later on, I learned more about Horacio Quiroga, and I decided I don't need to read any more of that author. But I had other stuff as well, and when it became clear that I was not going to be reading most of the stuff that I had, I got rid of it. Probably shouldn't have, but unfortunately, space is always a consideration and a problem. Unless you can do like Stephen King and buy the house next door to turn into a library. But of course, these I would not get rid of because I have read them. The poetry, of course, over and over. when you're young and you're writing poems, it does not trouble you if you come across words that you don't know. So that's how it goes with Garcia Lorca. I brought out, Mariana had a recent video talking about her historical interests, and so I've been thinking about that, and I brought out this book. I unfortunately, again because of space considerations, one of the areas of study, if you will, that I have made in a very haphazard manner has been the study of sugar. And I have not gone as far back as I need to, because now that I'm reading the Crusades, I understand that sugar is playing a big part in the region as well. So I need to find a good source for some information about the real old Arab sugar mills and whatnot. But this book is in my getting books here and there that seemed interesting to me, and this is on my eventual long-term TBR. It's one of the reasons I want to be a better reader. It is this one. And it's kind of remarkable because it's the history of this one plantation, which was actually established by the conqueror Cortez. And it supplied his family, his descendants, with good wealth up until, I think, in the late 1800s. I haven't looked at this for a long time, but I think it's a very interesting book. I would imagine in Spanish there is probably more recent scholarship on the subject, on this particular enterprise, and probably more thoroughgoing in detail than this. It's a subject, though, that fascinates me. When you study history, they tend not to tell you, say, what was the reason these colonialists were there, and so forth. And one of the problems with having space shortages is things such as my sugar books are not all located in one area, because I don't put my books into where they belong based on subject necessarily. And so I have books all over the place, and to try to dig them out and do a sugar overview would be kind of difficult. Now, this is one that I should get to at some point. It's supposed to be a really good overview, and I just happen to have it accessible. I have ones that are not accessible because they're behind things and so forth. Now, this is another one that I really want to get to. This is really about the canal system of supplying the fields with water in Hawaii, but I bet there's a lot of other good information that can be picked up. It's not really a long book, but it's going to take some movement to get me to be reading about sugar again. And then the other book that I just happened to pull out was this one, the sugar plantations in the formation of Brazilian society in one state. And it's a very good history. This is actually one that I have read. It's not a slim book, but I bet a lot of that is notes. Yeah, notes and appendices. Not bad. It's less than 500 pages. And this author also has a book out about storms, about hurricanes perhaps, and their impact on history. It's a type of history which I think is becoming more and more common. It was also a very good book. So I just thought I would show you these odd little books that have nothing to do with each other. I would like one day to pull out my books on slavery. Now, of course, there's some overlap. What was it? There's a little quote in here that I just read, and somebody said, if there were no colonies, there would be no navies. And then somebody else added to that, if there was no sugar, there would be no colonies. And sugar is really a topic that if you want to learn some history, it's worth delving into, because it seems to be a product which has really wreaked havoc with at least the citizenry of the United States. And I was about to say something before I got sidetracked to that. Oh yeah, I was going to say, I have a pretty good collection of different books touching on the topic of slavery, but that, of course, is geographically very dispersed, and geographically is how I tend to separate my books. And so that would be very hard for me to pull out and give you an overview of my collection in that subject, of which I've read much more than of the sugar books. Anyhow, I will leave it at that. I'll put a link to Mariana's video in which she talks about her interest in history. For me, becoming interested in history has been a long process, and I would love to do something of that nature as well, talk about how I started to be interested in figuring things out, because in her video, which I will link if I didn't say that in the description, they don't necessarily teach you important pieces of information that you need to know to really understand how things went down or why they went down the way they did. I will leave it at that. Thank you very much for stopping by my channel.